Abraham has a problem, a dilemma. And what's more, this problem, this dilemma, is on top of his heartache, his heartbreak, on top of his profound grief. You see, Sarah has died. Sarah, his bride of many decades. Sarah, mother of their son Isaac. Sarah, who had been with Abraham through thick and thin, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until now, until parted by death. Abraham's beloved Sarah is dead, and the problem, the dilemma, is that her body, her lifeless corpse, is still there at home, and Abraham has nowhere to bury her. Now, Abraham is an immigrant, an alien in the land of Canaan. He lives a nomadic life. He and his household live in tents. His livestock graze other people's land. And that was fine for the living to get by as nomads. But the dead need a place, a permanent resting place. And so it is that in the 23rd chapter of the book of Genesis, the biblical author takes great pains to recount the process of procuring a final resting place for Sarah's body. The formal, polite negotiations, the back and forth between Abraham, the buyer, and a prospective seller, negotiations more lengthy, complicated, and formal than were communicated in the few select verses we just read now. The negotiations involve the local people, all of whom appear to have a say, a voice, and maybe even a vote on whether to permit this alien to own property and thus to become as one of them. In the matter of aliens in our midst, another sermon for another day. Amen. In this case, as it turns out, the locals are delighted to welcome Abraham among them. As a propertied man, they already know him, they respect him. What's more, Abraham is desperate for a parcel of land, and they have him over a barrel, as it were. With Sarah's body beginning to decay, Abraham needs what they have, and he needs it now. And when the seller suggests a price, what is 400 shekels among friends? The answer is, it's a lot. The answer is, that's highway robbery. But Abraham swallows his pride, and he counts the shekels out one by one into the hand of Ephron the Hittite. And with that, Abraham becomes land-owning, a propertied man, in possession of quite a bit of acreage now, a large field with lots of trees, and most importantly, a cave. Tenderly, Abraham wraps the body of Sarah in a shroud. Tenderly, he carries her body into the cave. Tenderly, he lays her down. And she is home now, her spirit with God, but her lifeless corpse in its final resting place, safe and sound on Abraham's property. And later, Abraham's body too will be laid in the cave, then Isaac's, then Rebekah's, then Leah's, then Jacob's. How do you care for, what do you do with the mortal remains of your beloved dead? When the spirit is returned to God in heaven, when the life and light that animated your loved one's body is gone, when the spirit that was the person you loved has vacated the corpse, what next? What then? We humans have been burying our dead, that is, thoughtfully and intentionally disposing of the bodies of our dead, for at least 100,000 years. At heart, burial is a sign of respect for the body of our beloved. We don't discard it in the trash bin. We don't leave it out for scavengers. And some of that practice relates to public health, but there's far more to it than that. Instinctively, we can't bear to watch the bodies of our loved ones decompose. And equally as instinctive is the notion of respect The human body, it's an amazing thing. It is a wonder to behold. Your body is. Our bodies are fundamental to our very identities, to how we know each other. Robert, I know you by the sound of your voice. Dick, I know you by the tilt of your head. Nan, I know you by the expressions on your face. Paul, I know you by the rhythm of your stride. Rick, back there, I know you by the way you laugh and shrug. These mortal structures, these earthly tents are how we know what it is to be alive, what it is to taste strawberry ice cream, to smell lavender, to hear a baby's squeal of delight, to hug and to be hugged, to love and to be loved, to leap and catch a ball, to paint pictures, to make music, to dance, to feel pain. These mortal structures, these earthly tents, are how we know each other, how we love each other. Over 100,000 years ago, humans determined to ferry the bodies of our dead to some final resting place and to take great care over the doing of it, developing the arts of embalming and mummification and cremation, the use of containers, shrouds, caskets, vaults, urns, niches, the practice of including grave goods, a phrase that refers to items to be buried with the dead. In ancient times, pottery, stone tools, food. Today, soldiers are often buried wearing their uniforms and their medals. A child might be buried with a favorite toy, a sports fan with his team's cap, a chef with his apron. In 1882, the 15th minister of this church, Jacob Manning, a radical abolitionist, he was buried in his preaching gown. So 5 years ago, Old South Church in Boston launched a study we called Dying Well, Christian conversations about life and death. And for an entire month, the month of Advent, that's pretty much all we did. We talked about, we preached on, we sang of, and we taught about dying well, asking ourselves, what does that look like? What might that feel like to die well? Asking, can we transform the existential dread of death and dying into a process we might even embrace? A process we might learn to face with confidence, with acceptance. Can we accept the fact of our mortality as an integral stage of a natural continuum from conception to birth, through life, through death, and on to resurrection? And out of that study, there emerged a small group who wanted to talk about burial, about a final resting place for their remains and for the remains of their loved ones. We were led ably by our chairperson, Janet Nolan, and aided by attorney Larry Bowers. Carolyn Arrington was in charge of aesthetics. The elder family supplied funds and cheered us on from afar. And I want to say something about how very sweet this work has been. You might be surprised to learn that our laughter throughout this process has been as gentle as it has been persistent. Our laughter has suffused this undertaking like a soft spring rain. And the undertaking has led to the Robert Carl and Coley Kellum Elder Memorial Columbarium, located in the former Children's Chapel. The columbarium is comprised of rows of niches to hold cremated remains. We will dedicate the columbarium today immediately following worship. A word about the title of this sermon, a word I've only recently learned, Handsel, archaic, meaning a gift given at the beginning, or to mark an acquisition or the start of an enterprise, and with it to bring good luck. I found the word in an entry from Samuel Sewell's diary, dated June 19, 1700. Samuel Sewall was the colonial diarist and judge, a much revered member of this church, who, among other things, wrote the first anti-slavery tract on this soil. In his diary entry of June 19, 1700, Sewall is commenting about another member of this church, John Eyre, who has recently died at the age of 46. Sewall writes, quote, "Mr. John Eyre is entombed this day." And then Sewall adds this, quote, "9 of his children are laid there to Handsel, the new burying place." Now, the fact that John Eyre was preceded in death by 9 of his children speaks to the heartache of living in the 1600s. That, too, is another sermon for another time. But to Handsel, to inaugurate something, especially by being the first. As the bodies of the children of John Eyre Hanseled that new burying place, so is it that the urns of Bob and Coley Elder, beloved members of this church, the gentlest, most generous of people, so it is that their urns, the urns of Bob and Coley, Handsel our new burying place. With us today are 11 members of Bob's and Coley's family, their 3 children, Robert, Elizabeth, and Ralph, with spouses and children. And I am here to give witness to this day that the goodness, the generosity, the kindness, the humor of Bob and Coley Elder has passed on to the next generations. My friends, Westminster Abbey contains the remains, among others, of Isaac Newton, Charles Darwin, and now Stephen Hawking. Old South Church contains the remains of Bob and Coley Elder, and soon will contain the remains of Harry Lynn Huff, David Chandler, David Scott Palmer, Peter Southwell Sonder, and over time, the remains of Jim and Linda Crawford, David Story, Carolyn Arrington, Dick and Eleanor Yo, the Pitcher sisters, Diane Palmer, Eleanor Jensen and her parents, Joyce Akintola, John Wadlington, Jennifer Craig, Barbara Ansley, the occupants of Pew 99, and of course, many more. A letter will go out next week to the whole church to announce the opening of the columbarium for application. Abraham's question at the time of Sarah's death might be yours. When my beloved passes, where will I lay my beloved's body? Or perhaps this question, when my time comes, what will become of my body? Which is the same thing as asking, where do I belong? As asking, where is home? Amen.